Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Trisha Dugan. I am a senior recruiter out of our New York office, and I'm excited to have you all here this evening to learn a little bit more about what consulting is, and to hear from our fantastic panelists here tonight about Kearney and their journey through consulting. So before we go ahead and get started here, just have a couple of logistics for you. Um, we want to make sure that we are answering your questions throughout the webinar. We know that sometimes they're not the most interactive, so we definitely want to provide time for Q&A here. So there is in the right-hand corner of your screen a box called Slido. You can go ahead and submit questions throughout the webinar there. If there are questions that are being asked that you also want to have answered, please upvote those. We'll try to do those first. If you want any anonymous questions answered, you can go ahead and send them to Jen Yu. She is a co-host here on the panelist board. And then in the event that we don't get to your questions tonight, we are happy to review them and look at them. So you can go ahead and send those questions to carneyscareers.mba@kearney.com. So I'm going to quickly just let you know who is on the panel tonight, and then I'll have them do a quick introduction themselves. Bhavya is an associate in our Transactions and Transformations office in San Francisco. We have Matt Becker. He is an associate in our CMT practice in New York. We have Amy on the line here. She is also an associate general practice in our New York office. And Afan is a manager in our health practice in our New York office. So a lot of New York, so we can answer a lot of questions. But if you have questions about any other practices, offices, we will definitely do our best to answer those as well. So I'm going to pass it over to our panelists here now to introduce themselves.
Trisha. Hi, everyone. My name is Bhavya, and as Trisha mentioned, I'm aligned to the San Francisco office. For me, the reason I picked consulting was just to work on a diverse set of business problems and get a wide exposure across a bunch of different industries. And then also, I think the whole aspect of working with large teams and working directly with the client teams as well is really attractive to me. And I've had a ton of nice memories with Kearney people, but I think my favorite one to date is one of the offsites we had with the TNT practice, and we went on a sunset tour of Fort Sumter in Charleston, and it was one of my favorite days with the group so far.
Hey all, my name is Matt Becker. It was already mentioned New York office and the CMT practice. Very similarly, I was really interested in ultimately doing consulting because of the diversity of experiences and perspectives from the different colleagues that I have, and also working with really smart, intelligent, great people. In terms of my most memorable Kearney memory, obviously a lot of great dinners, a lot of great food. Most recently, went to an awesome Korean barbecue in New York to cap off a project, but definitely one of many memories I've had since joining the firm.
Uh-oh, Matt, you're going a little bit in and out.
I can hop in then. I think I'm next in the lineup. Hi everyone. I'm Amy. As Trisha mentioned, I'm an associate in our general practice out in the New York office. Though I feel like with all the co-locating, I'm a part of many offices as we go through Kearney, but aligned to New York. When it came to thinking about why consulting, when I was thinking about where I wanted to go out of my MBA program, I really was attracted to the idea that we could work creatively to solve really large problem sets. So not necessarily a specific defined, path, but that it can change, every time we look at these problems from client to client and across different industries, especially in the general practice. And also great learning opportunities, a chance to apply what I had done prior to business school, but also get to know things about, for example, working on a health project that I had never, an industry I didn't know anything about, but found I could be passable for semi-expert after a few weeks in some areas. And then I think in terms of a memorable Kearney moment, kind of staying in line with everybody, really enjoy the people and who I get to work with here. And a really memorable moment for me was my being on the Hudson River with all the interns in America during my wave, during my summer between years 1 and 2 at business school, and watching the sunset with everybody, and just enjoying all the great folks I got to work with over the summer. And with that, I'll pass it off.
Hey everyone, I'm Afan, based out of the New York office. I'm a manager and recently joined our health practice. Why consulting? I think everyone said it in one way, shape, or form. Is you get to work on really interesting topics and complex problems, and believe me, they are complex. So that's the fun part. The thing that has made me stay in this profession is the ability to develop deep friendships. You work with a group of people really intensely, and by the end of it, you come out with 1 or 2 friends per project. And I think that's just the most beautiful aspect of this job. I think I missed the memo on the memorable Kearney moment. Everyone put in something fun. I thought this was fun, but clearly out of line here. My first project was actually working directly with our CEO and our board on a firm growth project, and that helped me really understand the Kearney values: generosity, solidarity, and how even the most senior people were willing to hold my hand and explain the issues to me and potential solutions. I wouldn't have expected that, but that's what made it the most memorable and kind of made me like the firm even more. All right, so I'll talk a little bit about what it means to be a consultant, and I want this to be as interactive as possible, because I think when consultants talk about what is consulting, it's one thing, but I really want to hear from you guys as to what you are curious about. And there are no wrong questions, no weird questions. Feel free to ask anything, and we'll try to be as honest and as straight with you as possible. Right? So at its core, consulting is essentially we're problem solvers in a way that a lot of companies don't necessarily have the capability, right? So think about being specialized in solving a particular set of problems. You've seen the same problem 20 different iterations, and now you can go to a client and take 2 types of skills. One is a functional skill set, like, hey, I've seen this exact problem at this company, and across these industries. And the other one is a general problem solving ability, because you're always faced with all these really interesting challenges that aren't just unique to organizations, but are unique to their dynamics. You almost always have to come up with a unique, tailored strategy to solve a problem, even though you might have seen the same problem before, right? This time, maybe the organizational politics are different, maybe the context is a little bit different. So it's this ability to think quickly and structure your solutions, and that's the skill set that a lot of people value when they bring in any consultants. And of course, a big aspect of this is working in teams, kind of collaborating directly with clients, building those relationships, because at the end of the day, we want to be a trusted advisor to our firms. Okay, so I think there's a question. I can answer this. What is the one thing that you think distinguishes Kearney from other consulting firms, either in culture or the type of project, and what distinguishes the New York office? So I'll hold off on the New York office thought, but I can start off with the Kearney piece, and I'll have others chime in. Prior to Kearney, I actually worked at EY Parthenon, and one of the biggest differences in Kearney, I think, actually a couple of differences, right? The first one is Kearney's size. We are large enough to matter, but small enough to still feel like home. The great thing about Kearney is everyone seems like family. It's so small. You know pretty much all of the partners, not all of them, but at least a good portion of them. You've worked with them or interacted with them, and it feels a lot more you feel a lot more connected to the work and the groups you're working with. The other piece that really distinguishes Kearney is because we're small, we have to wear multiple hats. In other firms, you may have to specialize, right? Because they're big and they have the scale to dedicate specific people to specific types of problems. At Kearney, you kind of have to wear 2 or 3 hats at the same time because we're not big enough to have that dedicated capability, but also we're smart enough to figure it out, how to do it. And I think that is what makes the job infinitely more interesting, because now you're not just solving one set of problems. You may be working with a healthcare client, figuring out an organizational design solution, or you could be working with an aerospace and defense company, figuring out, how to save costs. So you are able to work on a variety of different projects across different industries and different services. And I think that's what truly distinguishes Kearney. Over to my colleagues.
And as one already mentioned, you can pretty much see we have a bunch of different practices. Our net is cast pretty wide, and there's a bunch of different specializations that Kearney works on. I don't need to go into specifics, but for me, I am from a service practice, transactions and transformation. And the way I got into my practice was I came from an investment banking and private equity background, and just the whole aspect of working directly in M&A and working in finance made me naturally gravitate towards transactions and transformations. However, and some of my fellow general consultant panelists here could speak better to this, but for some of the other people who start off as general consultants, they basically work on a bunch of different industries and across different services, and eventually end up finding something they naturally gravitate towards and aligning there. So with that, I will let anyone else who's a general consulting chime in if they'd like to.
As the lone generalist on here, I suppose that's me. I would agree very much with what Bhavya said, and it's a great opportunity to not feel pigeonholed maybe to a particular area just because of what you did before you joined or where your experience lies. If you're truly interested in having the opportunity to experience that breadth of industries, all the services, that opportunity is afforded to you in the general practice. I myself have worked on things from CPG to health to telco work, all a variety in just my first year as a generalist with the firm. I would also say that I think something I hear a lot from clients about in terms of what distinguishes us in terms of the way we approach the work, I would say also is we take a very collaborative approach in how we solve our problems with our clients. We really view it as we're one team working together. And I think that's something, we at least I've heard is maybe unique to some other firms. And I think is personally something I find very, very special and fulfilling about the way that we approach our work at Kearney.
Thanks, Amy. And with that, I'll pass it on to my next colleague.
Great. Maybe we just quickly go into, you can talk a little bit more about our other capabilities here, and then we'll pass it over to some other stories. Bobby, I believe this is.
Yes, I can totally talk to more on the private equity and the TNT side. So as Amy said, I think this is not one thing that's not limited to general practice, and that's like open to everyone. Even though you're aligned to a practice, you're very much open to go across industries and different verticals. Kearney operates as one firm, and there's definitely the opportunity to go and work across different verticals if you would like to and try stuff. So me personally, even belonging to TNT from the very get-go, I have exactly like Amy said, I've worked with a telco. I've worked on a healthcare client. I have worked in a typical due diligence project, which is more private equity and specific to the TNT tower. And I have also done some leadership change and organization work. So pretty much like everyone else has talked so far, we operate as one firm, and there's definitely the opportunity to go across a lot of different verticals and work on a lot of different industries and a lot of different types of work.
Cool.
Awesome.
So
Matt, you're back.
yes, I'm back. Sorry, everyone. I had a surprise trip come up, so apologies if I am cutting out a little bit, but that's just the nature of the job, something that you have to get used to and be flexible on. But I mean, I think a lot of what everyone's been saying definitely resonates, and at least for me, it comes true in actually my first project when I joined the firm, which is what I'll talk about. So on the left-hand side is kind of what I'm referencing to. At a high level, I was working on the go-to-market strategy for a retail client on a new business line. I came in really wanting that full generalist experience. I have a finance background, really no experience in marketing, but I was something I did a lot in business school and was really interested in. No experience in kind of CMT or our consumer retail practices, but again, really interested, something that I cultivated that interest a lot in business school. And when I was looking for my first project, really it was a very informal conversation with the partners, like, hey, this is something I'm interested in, and I was able to be staffed on it just through that conversation. And one of the questions I saw pop up in the chat was, what factors influence which projects you work on? And really part of it is your own skill set that you come into the firm with, and a part of it is also just networking and raising your hand to say, hey, I'm interested in this opportunity. Which is how I got this project. As far as this project goes, it's go-to-market strategy. What does that mean? It's really evaluating, what's the value proposition that our client was going to the market with in this business line. So it involved interviewing customers, doing expert interviews with those at other firms to really understand what our clients looking for in this specific business line, doing surveys, doing analyses of their pricing. It was really doing a ton of different types of analyses, and given to what Afan was saying before around, you have to wear different hats. I was involved in every step of the way. So it was a really great opportunity to get exposed to a ton of different types of problems and be able to lead them, and ultimately have a lot of great impact for the client as well. We did some follow-up work with them on the back of that project, and so I mean, all I have to say is it was a really great experience where at a variety of opportunities it was able to make a strong impact.
Awesome. Well, I think following up on that, I can handle the right-hand side, which is another experience here where this was, I think my third project or so at the firm, working on route to market for a fast-moving consumer good. And essentially we were tasked to design, how this fast-moving consumer good that was selling in several, other geographies was planning to enter the US market. So personally, I led our geographic prioritization work stream, which was really focused on building out a framework for how we were going to assign values to cities and states within the US, and then that would allow us to rank them in priority for the launch of the product. And, it was a great experience where I think, it brought me back to my old Excel modeling days, and was a good challenge there to develop that skill set a bit, which I hadn't flexed too much in business school, honestly, but had a chance to really work through constructing the framework for how we'd approach it, working very closely with the client on that, consistent iterations of, why we were weighting one factor this way and whatnot, and kind of building how we prioritized, which involved a lot of client interaction, which was a great experience for me, and something that is always a fun part of the job, I think. And then together with other work streams, taking this evaluation we had done of the cities of where to launch and taking in factors from other parts of the team. So what does the distribution landscape look like? What are the retail archetypes? How are these other components coming together, rather than just say the geographic preference of a certain area, and put that together to really come up with the list of where we would recommend for a wave one launch. So it was a pretty exciting project. It's a client we had done a lot of work with in other geographies, which also had a cool component because, as some folks were mentioning, Kearney is big enough to matter, but small enough to feel like home. And in a lot of ways, it's cool because you'll end up doing work where you'll be talking to partners from other geographies or other regions where we've done either work with the client or a similar style of work. And so it also kind of was a great opportunity for me to expand my network within Kearney and just get to learn from other senior folks on how they've approached these problems in the past, or what the nuances of a particular client were. And so I thought that was a really nice addition to the project work. And I would say, I guess, to also circle up on the question of how I got staffed on this, it came from from just a conversation I had with a partner who I had worked with briefly in the summer when I was an intern, and just followed up because I was interested in the space that he did. And he happened to mention he had something coming up that might be staffing, and put me in touch with the manager who was staffing out the team. And that's one way I think I've ended up staffing on a lot of projects through something similar to that process. But, happy when we get to the questions later to answer any more on that as well.
Fantastic. Well, definitely, again, know that we're getting a lot of questions in here, so really want to leave a bulk of the time for you all to get your questions answered. And so I'm going to start asking some of the questions we're receiving to some of our panelists. Feel free to keep sending them in. If you want to direct one to a certain person on the panel, feel free to call out their name. But I'll go ahead and jump right in here. I think we can have maybe Matt kick it off, and then for anybody else, Amy, if you want to kind of fill in here, talking a little bit about if you're interested in a practice. So for example, maybe Matt, if you could just kick us off, if you're interested in specializing in, CMT, does that limit you to certain offices? Can you talk about that a little bit?
So absolutely. The short answer is no. Kearney staffs nationally, globally, frankly, if you're open and willing to. And so I think if you want to live in a certain geography, but you want to do CMT, I don't think it really limits you. Certainly when you first join the firm, if you're trying to build, a local network and make friends outside of your project, then it might behoove you, for example, to live in New York or live in San Francisco, since that's where it seems a lot of CMT folks live. But honestly, I know CMT members that live all over the place in Dallas, Kansas City, and Seattle, and Vancouver. So to that end, it's really truly location agnostic where you are, and so there's a lot of flexibility there.
Awesome. Anybody else want to add on to that, or we can keep going? Just let me know.
I mean, really quick. So
Yeah.
I know I mentioned I'm aligned to San Francisco. I actually live in LA and pretty much have since I started at Kearney. So to add on, I'm basically just saying, yeah, location doesn't really matter. We staff pretty much across the board wherever. And I actually have worked on a CMT project, even though I'm not aligned to CMT. So as Matt said, it doesn't really matter. And we're pretty much flexible as long as you're interested, you express your interest. People don't necessarily care where you live. And it's more about just you expressing that you want to work on something and you're passionate about it or you want to try it out.
Fantastic. I'm going to go ahead to the next question here. Skipping around a little bit, maybe Amy, you could take this one. And again, feel free, panelists, to jump in after this. What sort of learning and development opportunities are available to support your development here at Kearney? What have you taken advantage of?
Yeah, so I think there's really two types, kind of the formal opportunities and a little bit more of the informal. I think on the formal side, you'll see, and especially as a generalist, I get to take advantage of a lot of them. Practices will have trainings, and some of them can be I recently went to one from Bavia's practice at TNT, and it was a very tactical approach to, I had expressed some interest in maybe doing a due diligence. I have not done one at the firm before. I know there's a very specific way to do them, and each firm has their approach. And there was an entire day training on exactly how we approach, say, an operational due diligence and all of the resources that were available to you. Essentially, I took it as, I'm sure people who had done it before were like, oh, I know all these things, but here maybe just a best practice nugget or two. But like for me, I thought, wow, this is really useful. This tells me exactly kind of what's expected, what the cadence is, where all the resources are, the templates for requesting X, Y, and Z. And really, I think was a great training opportunity as someone who hadn't done one before, ready to kind of go in and feel like, I won't say that I could ace it, but, at least do a decent job at it. So there are some really formalized trainings like that. And in addition to the practices, Kearney does, they call them junior electives when you join. So until you're a manager, you can you can sign up for particular courses. So like I just took one on leading work streams, and it was about scoping out work plans and deciding how you're going to approach a project, especially when you start to lead teams of business analysts or senior business analysts and things of that nature. And it gave you a really practical, tactical toolkit of how to approach, say, running a work stream, and then eventually when you get to manager, running a project. So there's a variety of those. And then I'd say informally, there are lots of resources on our internal sites that have trainings that are either practice specific, or say you get assigned to something from our leadership change in org, maybe practice on an operating model. And there'll be like a variety of trainings on that you can kind of take as a course at your leisure. And I'd say that's informal because you're doing it yourself, but still a little bit formal, I suppose. Not Misi, sorry guys, but it's but I would say you've got that, and then also just essentially, I'd be wrong to not admit the learning and training that you get from your colleagues, because everyone at Kearney is super helpful and supportive. And whenever you're staffed into something new, I think you'll often get, almost crash courses from colleagues on how they do this, or here's an example of a model that I built if you want to use this as a starter. And I think there's just lots of learning opportunities to your heart's desire. But, happy to open this up to the rest of the panel if I'm sure I missed 100 of them.
Yeah, and I'll build a little bit on Amy's point. I think I'd say half of the learning comes from the project itself. Consulting it's very much a apprenticeship model, right? You have to do these things to learn them, and that's the fun of it. Especially if you're a generalist, you get to work across a variety of industries and a variety of different topics. And every time you're running into a 6-week, 12-week, whatever the project is, and by week 3, you're more or less an expert. And it's amazing how many different industries you end up knowing at least something about in a very, very short period of time.
Fantastic. Awesome. I see this question's getting a lot of upvotes, so I'll ask this one next. And anyone can answer this on the panel, but what was your biggest surprise after joining Kearney that you discovered about the firm or about consulting?
I can take this one first. I think the biggest surprise, especially with Kearney, was a lot of times when you think of consulting, it's like, hey, the client has a problem, come in, figure out the solution to the problem, deliver the recommendation, and boom, you're done. That's not the case. That's almost never the case. Any organization you go into, you have to understand the politics, the different stakeholders, what everyone's agenda is, what's the big picture behind the project. And I think Kearney does that better than a lot of firms, because we're small enough, so we have a lot of kind of different relationships that are concentrated at our partner level compared to other firms that may have kind of a one-to-one type of relationship. And just understanding the kind of all those connections and all those relationships and those conversations that happen, and how much they end up impacting the work and the project and the deliverables themselves. That was a big surprise to me.
I think one that came to mind for me about just a surprise about consulting in general was, I think I was surprised that there's much more ambiguity with everything than I think I would have thought. Meaning that you won't always have the perfect solution or the perfect data set or, everything that you would wish to get somewhere. It's to an extent, to get to the right answer, you have to be comfortable along the way that you have to make assumptions, you have to stay flexible, things are going to be dynamic a little bit more. And I think I was just surprised that a lot of the times to keep moving, it's kind of that 80-20 rule a little bit, right? Sometimes too, that, you get somewhere, you feel comfortable, and it allows you to move to the next step, because we do have deadlines, we do have milestones we have to reach. And I think just realizing that, not everything is neatly tied with a bow, and you're going to get all the right data you want in every answer. And I think that's consulting in general, certainly not Kearney specific, but that surprised me a little bit.
I can go next.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll go quick. For me,
No, go
at
for
least
it, Matt.
about Kearney, the most surprising thing has been just how much I feel like I can be authentic at work. And for me, like the anecdote that I always say was actually in my final round interview with the firm. It was the behavioral with the head partner of the New York office. I was very nervous. He asked me my favorite book, and coming from a finance background, I said, "Too Big to Fail." I could talk to it intelligently. I'd read it many times. I liked it. And he basically called BS on my answer. He's like, you're more interesting than that. I know there's something more beneath the surface. And I told him about this book, Kafka on the Shore, that I was reading. We started talking about metal music. And, that interaction, I think, was really just exemplary of like how my interactions have gone at the firm in terms of, people really wanting to know you, people wanting you to bring your true self to work, and that ultimately just making the job that much more enjoyable. And it's continued to perpetuate and continue throughout all my projects. So yeah.
I love that. That's awesome. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about travel. So again, that's changed quite a bit over, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. But can you talk a little bit more about what the travel looks like as a consultant? And I'll leave this open to anyone to answer.
For this, from my experience, I think it's very project specific and very dependent on what kind of a project you're working on. So I've pretty much all the projects I've worked on have been hybrid to the most part, where it's travel every other week or so, or some might co-locate more to a common office because it's easier to work together. However, I will add that most projects that I've worked on have been very flexible. If you cannot make it to a physical location some particular week, most people are flexible to it and people understand. So I think the short answer is projects are hybrid for the most part now, and you're pretty much able to work from wherever, but there's definitely times where for bigger meetings or for specific relationship building with the client, you are expected to be on client side, and that's just not, I wouldn't say it's like it has to be every week. I think it's like mostly every other week for me so far.
Great. Anybody? Go ahead, Afan.
Yeah, I think it's also to Bhavya's point, it's highly dependent. You might have a project that's local and that's amazing, or you could have a project in the middle of nowhere. So it really depends. I think there was a question around kind of post-pandemic travel. I think things have changed a little bit where clients are realizing that you don't need to travel every week. Now, that's not the same across all clients. There are some clients where you're still traveling, if not Monday through Thursday, at least Tuesday through Thursday. And then there are others who are now realizing like, hey, maybe the every other week model works, or maybe you just need to come in for some of the key meetings. But I will say that the best part about the job is the ability to be with your teams in person, whether or not there is a client involved. That's where you learn the most. Teams has done a phenomenal job, but it's not, remote isn't necessarily the most conducive to your growth and development, especially if you're early on in your career.
That's a great point. Afan, since you're already speaking, I did get a question directed to you. So, in hearing from others on the type of work they do, as a manager now, maybe you could talk a little bit more about the, very at high level, what types of projects, are within health, and what opportunities, you've gotten.
Yeah, so I will talk about my experience first and then kind of extrapolate it to the broader health practice. So even though I said I joined the health practice recently, I've been working on health projects pretty much for the past year. And primarily because I absolutely loved working with that set of people. It wasn't that I had any particular interest in health. I just loved the people and the team and the type of work. So started off with a project with a Canadian insurer that wanted to understand, hey, what does the future of healthcare in Canada look like in the next 15, 20 years? What does that mean for us? Then we took that and said, okay, well, here's a potential growth strategy for that. And then beyond the growth strategy, then they engaged us again to say, okay, well, you gave us a growth you told us what the healthcare system is going to look like, gave us a growth strategy. Now help us go to market with that strategy. So it was really kind of delivering all the way from the initial idea down to exactly how you do this. That was very rewarding. Then I worked with a major pharmacy client on a cost transformation effort, and currently working with another pharmaceutical manufacturer to think about how to make their organization more effective. So different groups are talking to each other in the right manner, especially if you're a very global organization and you have very, very complex supply chains. So that's my experience. In general, the health project does work across the board. We work with pretty much all of the major global healthcare pharma companies, and the type of work ranges all the way from kind of more strategic questions down to supply chain type of work. As some of you may know, Kearney is known for its supply chain expertise. And so naturally, a good part of the work happens there, but that's also in conjunction with our specific supply chain practice as well. So healthcare clients usually, if it ends up being a supply chain project, it goes to the supply chain practice, but our projects are pretty diverse.
Fantastic. Next question I'm going to ask here, and maybe Amy, you can kick it off, is can you talk a little bit more about what the work-life balance looks like at Kearney and in consulting?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I would say it can vary very much week to week. I don't know if my colleagues would agree, but I would say, generally, Kearney puts a lot of guardrails in place and tries to assist to make sure that everyone's getting what they need in terms of we have work well, be well charters that we do on every single project. There was a weekly barometer that just was pinging actually in my inbox about 30 seconds ago, asking how your well-being's going at work, meaning how are you feeling and also how many hours a week are you working. Those do actually get flagged. I learned that the hard way when I flagged a very high hour one week, because as I kind of mentioned, it's ebbs and flows. And when I logged that, but I logged that I was also feeling good, people experience reached out just to check everything was okay. So I wouldn't say, that they're, I think it can be sometimes deceptive when you hear people saying, like, oh, the work hour consulting, terrible work life. I think there are some weeks are harder than others, but that tends to be very project dependent. On a week where you're leading up to a major client deliverable, the team may be working a little bit more, or maybe at the beginning of a project when you're getting your groove a little bit. But generally, I've found it to be fairly sustainable, in the sense, especially like for me, after about 3 o'clock on Friday, I'd love to hear other people's thoughts. Nobody pings me at Kearney. I'm pretty much off. I don't work on the weekends. Nobody looks for me on the weekends. I don't get any emails on the weekends. I see people smiling. Maybe they're getting emails on the weekends, but it's for the most part, I find, what am I doing on a Wednesday night, right? At 6 o'clock? Like, that doesn't matter too much to me if I'm closing up some documents or working on things. But I have really I'd say most of better part of Friday afternoon and the entire weekend totally checked out of work. And, I found it to be actually pretty sustainable. And I do find that the folks at Kearney, both the seniors on projects as well as our general people experiences team, generally care about your well-being and want to ensure that you feel you have what you need in terms of work-life balance. And I know that's a personal answer, for everyone individually of what they need.
I can add something here really quick. I think when I first joined the company, one of the partners on my practice, he told me, find ways to make it sustainable for yourself. So to Amy's point, every project we do, we have work well, be well charters. And I think the one really good thing that I found in all my teams so far is that we sort of talk through our ways of working. What hours do you prefer? What block of hours do you need for your personal time in a day? For example, for me, I love to go and run every day. And most of the people I've worked with so far, they know this about me. They know I need to take that time of the day for my mental sanity. And no one bothers me. I take that 45-minute to an hour block, and I do that every day. So whether or not I'm on a project, unless it's like, crazy deliverable or something needs to go out the next hour, other than that, like that's something I've fairly done even through my most hectic projects, and people have respected that. So I think all this to say that it's still flexible to some degree, and like even though you might be working longer hours some week, people will give you the time you need for your own mental sanity. And I think the advice someone gave me was to be vocal about the things you need to stay sane, to your manager, to your team, and then people are flexible and they work around it.
Fantastic. I think we have time for one more question here before we close up. And I like this one too, because I think it just speaks to the entrepreneurial spirit of Kearney. But the question was, and again, opening up this to the panel before we close up. Can you talk about an experience where you might have started something new at Kearney, or had an initiative or project that you worked on that you were super passionate about? That could be within the confines of a project, or something completely unrelated that you're doing right now at Kearney.
I can go. So even though I'm part of the health practice, I have a lot of interest in financial services, specifically activist investors. Don't ask me why, but that's just kind of a weird passion that I developed pre-business school and during business school. So the one thing at Kearney was, okay, well, how do I now take that and kind of blend it into my experience at Kearney? I got in touch with a couple of people from our leadership practice, and we actually started developing this offering, so to speak, to take to the CFOs of different companies and help them understand, hey, how do you make sure your finance organization is resilient? How do you make sure you're allocating capital the right way? How do you make sure you're doing a lot of these things? So even though it's not related to healthcare, but it was related to my interests, and that just Kearney allows you to do that. And some of the advice I keep on getting from partners is, hey, if you want to do something, go make it happen.
Great. Anyone else before we wrap up? Okay.
I think I just wanna quickly just reiterate that Juan's exactly right. Like I've gotten advice so many times. If you have an idea, if you have an initiative, or there's anything you want to do, just speak up. And as long as it's reasonable, people will give you the resources to do it. And one of the things in TNT that we're actively working on is our DE&I initiative, getting in more in the practice. And as a part of that, we actually started a women's network, and we're like doing more women networking events around the practice and across the whole firm. So I think that was something that we newly started, but we had a lot of support from our practice leaders and the partners in our practice. So back to what Juan said, as long as you have an idea and you are open and you talk about it, people will let you make it happen.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I think it's really an awesome thing about the firm, and just the opportunities that you get. I know we're a little over on time. I know we didn't get to everyone's questions, but please, please, please send them to kearneycareers.mba@kearney.com. We know you're still considering what your journey looks like and if consulting might be a good fit for you. So feel free to stay connected with us. We are happy to help you navigate your journey as you start business school in the fall. And I want to thank the panelists tonight for joining us and for all of your great insight and stories. So thank you, everyone. Have a great night.